Welcome to Orphan Espresso. I'm Doug,
I'm Barb.
I'm Joanne.
and I'm doing my Chinese New Year maintenance thing here on the Apex. It's Lunar New Year. It's when you clean everything up here. We're in Taiwan, and so I would estimate that this is something that you do like twice a year, and it's about the only maintenance actually that I can think of for the Apex, and that is basically cleaning and re-lubricating the needle bearings and maintaining the gearbox. What I've done is that I've taken the grinder all apart, as we've shown you in our deep cleaning video, and I've taken the gearbox off and disassembled the gearbox, which is it's simple to do by you take a small wrench. This is 7mm. You hold this peg still, and then you take out these small screws, these cap screws that hold the gears in place, the planetaries in place. Remove the planetaries, and then basically you just clean it all up and put it all back together. By cleaning, I've been here doing this with my little stick. This is my little skewer stick, and you get in and you clean all the old grease and black stuff basically out of the teeth. You just pull it out, wipe this off occasionally. And actually this is really a pleasant job to do. You get your hands a little dirty, but it's not the big issue. So I clean all those out. Got an old toothbrush and sweep the rest of it out. This one's all finished. I've done this, and the last thing I do is I take my WD-40, like everybody has it. This is the international version, by the way. You see the international version of the WD-40, universal. Rinse all the debris out, spray it out with some compressed air. Just get the gear good and clean. These small ones I've also done in the same manner. I just sat here and I took my little stick and just clean the grease out of them, clean the old grease. And you just look at it. There's a line here. You go around, just maintenance. This part here, I've wiped this off with a cloth, and there's a little groove here that you want to make sure that there's no debris in, which I just clean it with a stick, wipe it off with a cloth, make sure everything's nice and clean. These are the planets. These are the planetary gear holders. This is the sun gear. I've cleaned this with a stick. I've saved this to show you that basically just rinse the debris out of the gears, and this is just a general maintenance procedure on a machine. I've also taken this and cleaned off made sure the axle is nice and clean. Now I get down to my needle bearings. The needle bearings are something that people have reported over the last few months that can sometimes make a little squeak. And we did use some light oil on those, and now we're actually putting some grease on these, so it really prevents that issue. We got two sets, the small hole and the large hole. The large hole goes in the wheel. The small hole is part of the spring tensioning mechanism. You can tell which is which because the large set will go over the axle like that, and the small set will stop here in the end. Okay, so we have two sets of them. Once again, I just take these and clean them off. And I've got my WD-40 on there, just a paper towel. Make sure that you don't have any grit or gunk down in them.
I like the carpet square you use.
Yeah, carpet squares are really handy. Okay, so this basically all there is to this process is just cleaning them off. Now, what I do here, when I reassemble, Now, I like to use, most bicycle shops have really good selections of grease. This is a fairly a light grease. It's specifically for bearings. If you use some automotive greases, sometimes they're a little too heavy. But if you go to an auto shop, if you get a little tub that says bearing grease, you can't really go wrong with that. One thing, do not use Dow 111. Don't use Molykote. I tried Molykote on this, and it's so thick that it just gloms up, and it gets thicker when it gets hot, so it gets worse and worse. But this is just a light, and plus I like the bike gears. You know, the stuff you can get at a bike shop is really cool. And you take this, all right, now you notice there's a machine side of this little gear and a flat side of that little gear. Okay, I'm going to put this in there. The machine side goes down so if I can get it in there. Oh, that's really a good one. All right, I must have a little piece of grit in there or something. There it goes. All right, so that goes in there. So it's nice and smooth. These parts are all clean, but as I said, now I've got already have a little developing pool of it, so that's good. Now just coat that over there, and then put it in the proper orientation. I had to check to make sure. They're really tight tolerances, so you have to make sure you have it all lined up nicely. And you notice, see, there's a groove, right? Machine groove up there. That's actually kind of a little grease or a little oil trough. That the grease will stay in there and keep them maintained. Nice design. So anyway, I assembled these. As I said, it's something that you have to pay a little bit of attention to make sure you have them lined up so they'll go in properly. There it goes. Just test it, so it feels nice. Now I'll take these and I go ahead and reinstall them in the main gear. You just push them into these 3 holes. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And test to make sure it's nice and smooth. Now these 3 small screws will go in those 3 holes, and that's a 3mm hex that tightens them up, and you have to hold it still. Once again, you have to hold this still with a wrench, and you put them in there and you tighten them down. They don't rotate in the hole. The only thing that rotates is the gear on the shaft. Okay. Now I'll also, when I go to reassemble this, I'll also take and I'll put some of my grease down in the gear itself. You really don't want to put too much on, because the more you put on, the more you're going to have to take off when you clean it. But it can't hurt to grease this system. And the last thing that I'll do is when we assemble the grinder, the last thing we do is we put grease on the sun gear, which it transfers grease to all of these other teeth in here. You really don't want to get it over lubricated, but you want to have it adequately lubricated. I'll set this aside. I'll put the screws in later. This part, when I'm assembling the grinder, I basically do the same thing, is that I'll put the 2 screws in and take my grease.
Screws? Needle bearings.
Needle bearings, sorry. I do this in place on the grinder generally, because that way I don't get any grease all over myself when I'm putting the grinder together. Now I've got a mismatch here. There's a small one. This is the big one I just did. Okay? So you take it and you put, I like these little bike grease guns. You know, this stuff's available online or whatever. Another brand,
Bike shop.
Bike Shop. This is a Park Tool, which they make a lot of bike stuff, and this is also pretty good grease. This is more familiar to be like an automotive grease. It's the green stuff. They call this a polylube, polyurea grease. This is just plain old grease, this Ice Tools. So anyway, then once this is fully lubricated, this big one goes in the wheel, okay? That's where that one goes. So now you know that you're not gonna have any squeaks and it's nice and smooth. Once again, you do this one when you're assembling the grinder, this one goes down here on this peg. Okay, that's part of the reassembly process. And it's a lot easier just when you're reassembling it, you put on one, you put on and then you put some grease on it, on this ring, then you put this on, you put a little more grease on it, and then you put the third one on. It's easier to do in place than it is on the table because you just grease all over everything. That's the basic maintenance, is lubrication. As I said, this grinder has been used for about 4 months straight, and I've never lubricated these. It was time to clean them, and this was a good time to do it. So that's the maintenance, lubrication and cleaning. So there you go. Hope this helps. Bye-bye.